talk a little bit about the history of software development from my own personal perspective. Back in 2000, during the height of the dot-com bubble, I was working as a software developer, and people were excited about active server pages. So Microsoft had looked at Java, which was complicated to develop a web application with. There were so many different interconnected pieces. It took a person with a lot of experience to effectively be able to use JSPs and servlets. But Bill Gates was smart. He came out with active server pages, and like you could teach a 10-year-old how to code with it because it was very straightforward. Even to this day, it's actually pretty good. It's almost a copy of PHP, but it came with its own development environment. So the setup of the web server part of the development was sort of included with the development environment, and then he also packaged it with the operating system. So all you needed is your operating system disk, and then you just go through the menus and install IIS, and it would be working. It was that simple. So I got a lot of work in active server pages, but the industry was developing quickly and moving quickly because there was a frenzy to get businesses online using computers. And computers were kind of, like my son says, sexy and new and exciting, and it's what people wanted to get into. So, and there weren't that many people doing it because the number of graduates, because it's a relatively new field, there were a lot of people, there was more demand for the profession than the number of people to do it. So there were lots of good job opportunities. Then I noticed that, eventually I moved to Canada about 3 or 4 years later, about 2004. And by then, Bill Gates had come out with something completely new to revolutionize software development, and he called it Microsoft.net. And there were a lot of different ways of developing websites, and he changed the way that Microsoft does web developments from a scripting language to a compiled language, which added complexity to making a website. And in the process, he did something which a lot of developers did like .NET, because it was like, well, Microsoft wouldn't like me saying this, but it was like a copy of Java, but they said it's completely different. It's nothing to do with Java. But it actually, in effect, was a copy of Java. It was like, because they didn't have an object-oriented programming language for the web until this .NET was released. But then they did something that the Java boys did not do, which, in my opinion, was a bit of a mistake. And that was they took over control of the front end, and they created controls on the server side that rendered themselves. It's kind of like if you ever use Front Page and you write out you make an HTML document like a web page in Front Page, you have no control over what the program outputs, and it didn't output legible code. Like a human couldn't really read it. It was all gibberish, and it couldn't really be edited except in the program, which is, I think, what Microsoft at the time, a bit of a monopoly and a kind of a private company, and they didn't really They were obsessed by control. They want to control everything. And pure tech people like Steve Wozniak, they kind of didn't like Microsoft. It was kind of like it's a bit amateurish. And anyways, it caused all kinds of problems in developing web applications. It was very popular because it was supposedly easier to use, although my experience was that you develop a web application, they all look the way that Microsoft made it look because they controlled how the output appeared. Then your boss would come over and say, I don't like the way that looks. I want it to look like what the client gave us and from this other program, or what our old website looked like. Can you change the way it looks? And then you would sit there and you'd be like, I think so. And then you look at the controls and you realize you have no control over anything. And so it was like, but then your boss is like, I want it to look the other way. And it was like, you'd have to spaghetti code around, like after the web page loaded, you have to write some cutesy JavaScript and go in and find the controls that Microsoft had output and then change them. So then your website would have all these weird after effects where the web page would flicker and like look one way, and then the JavaScript code would kick in and change the appearance the way the boss wanted it. And you'd have all these weird like quirks, we call them. And it's because the programming language was just really private and difficult to work with. It defeated the whole purpose of the philosophy of the web. So that's basically my experience developing web applications through the years as it developed. And then on the Java side, when I started getting into that, it got way too complicated because there were so many resource files. The web servers never worked straight from the download, and there were so many touch points that you had to configure to get started. And then you'd have a boss being like, you've been on this project for how long and you've produced nothing? I'm just trying to get the tool set up, working. Like, it's just the way it was. And it was like very difficult. So anyway, that's my experience with software development. But things have improved, and actually there was a lot to learn. I mean, not only did you have to learn the object-oriented methodologies, the technologies as they changed over the years, then you also pick up simple legacy scripting language, because you never knew what industry you were in, what level of sophistication and automation they were at. So a lot of them had old systems, and you'd have to pick up new languages. You'd have to learn PHP, which is an older web programming language, one of the first ones. You'd have to learn Python, Perl, and then sometimes you have to go in and do some C++, and they work with DLLs and pointers and C#. So I was just like spent so much time getting trained on all these different systems and ways, and what's weird is Microsoft had the ability to make our lives so much easier, and they deliberately don't. They stop short. They make it obfuscate things and make it very difficult, and it's like, just do it. I think they do that because they want to restrict entry into the field. That way it keeps salary compensation high, and then they made a lot of money on their training programs, and if it was too easy to use, there'd be no purpose for the training. So it was like, I think it was just a profit thing. They wanted to make more money. Anyway, this recording is going on for 10 minutes now, and I'm just experimenting a little bit with the background lighting effects. I just wanted to talk a little bit about my career as a software developer in the tech industry since the dot-com bubble of 2000.